Listen, I know how I feel when it comes to musical biopics, but I don't know. In keeping with the theme of the film subject I'm about to discuss, the times they are a changing. Maybe. Hey everyone, this is D Movieman coming to you with Toot. Beep Beep. Yes, another parking lot playback. Yes. Boom. I am here once again to give my out of the theater thoughts, this time on A Complete Unknown. Co-written and directed by James Mangold and starring Timothée Chalamet, Elle Fanning, and Monica Barbaro. This film is actually based on the 2015 book Dylan Goes Electric, Newport, Seeger, Dylan, and The Night That Split the 60s. Now, as far as our director, many of you will be familiar with him for his work on the films Girl Interrupted, Walk the Line, 3:10 to Yuma, The Wolverine, and Logan, among others. And I can absolutely say that James Mangold has carved out a very unique, very interesting filmography for himself, and he definitely has some bangers on there. When it comes to this film, what I thought was really interesting is that, of course, he previously directed Walk the Line, starring Joaquin Phoenix, and Reese Witherspoon as Johnny Cash and June Carter. And it's so interesting because there's a little overlap involving one or more of the figures that appear in that film, and the fact that we get the chance to re-immerse ourselves in that world was something I found to be really interesting, watching him kind of dip his foot back into that world, not just as far as him stepping into yet another musical biopic, but quite literally jumping into a world that explores some of the same figures, some of the same styles of music, and just the overall storytelling. So I thought that was really, really interesting just for starters. And I think this is an extremely well-made film. I know that when it comes to musical biopics, I have my challenges because a lot of times they amount to little more than just a cinematic Wikipedia reel. And although I get it, in a way it's beneficial because it allows people who aren't familiar with some of these people, especially these very iconic, legendary figures, and maybe some lesser known figures who, deserve to be known by a larger audience and by plenty of people. But a lot of times you get this very surface exploration into that. And I find that more often than not, I want something a lot more introspective. And more often than not, that isn't what happens. You kind of get this brief we get a nice little glide amongst the ice. We might get some stuff here and there. Very surface, very one-dimensional, not really delving deeper. I'm not really a fan of that. And as I've said, it happens more often than not. But I will say A Complete Unknown seems to be taking a complete, mind you, to use the appropriate wording. It definitely takes a completely different approach to it. Now, in some ways, the formula is still there. I will admit that. And I do think that depending on what you know about Bob Dylan as a fan, as a longtime fan, as someone who's likely followed his career, you may know a lot more. And you may say you kind of got a little bit, I wanted more. There are certain things they didn't cover. It's very difficult anyway to cover the summation of someone's career and life. But there was just something very distinct about the way that this was captured and the way that this aspect of his career and his life was captured. It is also dealing with a very significant transition music-wise, which I found to be really compelling as well. One thing I've realized, although I am a soul, R&B, quiet storm, jazz baby at heart and always will be, I think there is something about music as a whole, music as a medium, that I appreciate. I think the older I get, the more I appreciate it even more. Just when I hear different, especially when it comes to instrumentation. When it comes to instruments, it's just my ear for that, and how I appreciate the arrangements, the orchestration, the conducting, just how an entire song, how an artist's vision can come together, and it just strikes you in such a significant way. And as someone who personally considers Summer Madness to be the greatest song of all time, and a song that is so evocative and brings such distinct memories, and how it just strikes a chord deep inside of me, I know what that's like. So it was really something having the opportunity to discover more about Bob Dylan and his music. And I realized that I was already familiar with Bob Dylan because I did hear the song The Times Are A-Changin', which I think is an excellent song, and I can absolutely understand why it made the impact it did. And even watching it within the film, it was a very impactful moment. So I just think overall, just the exploration of Bob Dylan, who in many ways I can tell is a bit of an enigma and we definitely get a little bit of that vibe here. I would also say that the performances are very, very strong. Timothée Chalamet, who I've said before, I recognize that there are actors who are, by all intents and purposes, great, solid, on-point actors, but I realize there's also a difference between someone who has the ability to act and someone who acts and has performances that resonate with me. And I will say that Timothée Chalamet, while absolutely talented, can't deny that, he is not an actor who has always resonated with me. I will say that. And I think because he tends to play characters that are very aloof, kind of offbeat, kooky, just, you know, it also adds to that disconnect. And although you can probably see some of that here, I was worried about that, but I don't know. I just felt a different kind of energy. I just felt like he was bringing something very different to this role that really did hit a certain way. I will say I still wanted to learn more about Bob Dylan and just kind of get inside his head, but I think maybe that wasn't the entire point. And it was more so what he represented as far as the genre of folk and the evolution of that and what that really meant. And that's something I appreciated hearing. I'm telling you, just when those guitars started going, I was just like, yes. It was just something so mesmerizing and striking and and just so entertaining about seeing these artists, including Bob Dylan, but also others, just really come together, and you just see that love and that passion for music and what it's like to have that come forth, especially in front of an audience. So yes. Elle Fanning, of course, who I've seen grow up, she is solid as well, but I have to say Monica Barbaro as Joan, she kind of steals the show here. And she was one character that I was quite mesmerized by as well. I'd be interested in seeing what her story is, or just learning more about her. And I also thought her relationship and the portrayal of that relationship, working relationship, among other things, with Bob Dylan, I thought all that was very compelling as well. So I'm very interested in also learning more and maybe doing a little bit of a deeper dive into her career and her music, because her performances as well were really, really solid, especially her duets with Bob Dylan in the film. Outside of that, I think it's a film that manages to feel distinct and somewhat unique. It's very difficult to break that biopic formula, but there's something about this film that really does feel like it is trying to subvert as much as it can that formula and really just delve into the love of music, the art form, the creative vision, like all of that. And that's just something for me as a creative myself, of course. That's something I really, really love to see, and I love seeing any story or narrative that supports that and delves deeper into that. So yeah, so overall I can definitely say I got a lot more out of this than I expected to. As far as cons, I would say the biggest con for me is pacing. Because I will be honest, I got to the halfway mark. I just happened to look at my phone, so I was like, I wonder how far we are. Not necessarily boredom or anything, But I looked and I was just like, oh, wait a minute. We have a whole another hour left. And I was just like, oh. And I was kind of fading towards the end. And I do think I get it because we want to explore, especially when it comes to certain years within someone's career. I understand it's very important and you want to have the time to cover that. But the 2 hours and 20 minutes, it was like I was fading. My mom actually had to wake me up a couple of times because I was fading fast, and the movie started at 7. So for me, it was just like, okay. And I do think they could have, given the way that the film is made and the story that it is centered around, I think it could have still done that in a shorter runtime. Not significantly shorter, but maybe considering the pacing, we could have at least taken it back to maybe 2 hours and 10 minutes, or maybe just 2 hours. So I would say that was probably my biggest issue. And then, of course, if you're wanting to learn more about Bob Dylan as a whole, this is not capturing his entire career, which, of course, for me is fine because there is now an opportunity for me to learn more, especially with my audiobooks. I'm a big advocate of that. But I will have an opportunity to go and learn more at that point after the film, which is another reason why I'm glad I had the opportunity to watch this one. Outside of that, I would say I think this film is very well made. It definitely is going to fall into the Oscarbait category, which may polarize some people, but I do think that Timothée Chalamet and some aspects of the film itself, I can definitely see some nominations. I would love to see Monica Barbaro get a nomination as well. It's a film I'm glad I had the chance to see. I was very iffy because I know how I am when it comes to these biopics, especially musical biopics. But in the end, it's a film I'm glad I had the chance to see. And I'm really interested, of course, as always, to see what other people think as well. Shout out to a legend, Bob Dylan. A Complete Unknown will be released in theaters Christmas Day. You guys feel free to check it out. Leave your thoughts below and let me know what you think. So, once again, this is D, Movieman, signing off, and I'll see you at the movie.